Gary is standing in a muddy lane in the English Midlands, holding a pair of gloves, silently rehearsing a sentence that could ruin his life. Because in England in the 1360s, it was possible to get married by accident. No priest, no church, no paperwork, just two people, one badly worded sentence, and congratulations, you were legally wed for life, and the full authority of the church would enforce it. Gary does not know this. Gary thinks he is going on a date. It is the 1360s in a small farming village in the middle of England. The plague swept through about a decade ago and killed roughly half of everyone, which was terrible. But it came with one strange side effect. Suddenly, there was more land than people to work it. Wages went up, rents came down, and for the first time in living memory, an ordinary man like Gary could realistically afford to start a household. And here it is worth pausing, because almost everything you think you know about medieval marriage applies only to rich people. Nobles were betrothed as children, to strangers for land. Peasants were not. The average English villager married in the mid-20s to someone from their own village or the next one over, and, this is the genuinely surprising part, they mostly chose each other. The church had ruled that the only thing required to make a marriage valid was the free consent of the two people involved. Not the parents, not the Lord, just the couple. This sounds romantic. It is also, as Gary is about to learn, a legal minefield with flowers painted on it. Gary has his eye on Matilda, the daughter of a farmer 3 fields over. His plan has 4 steps, and Gary is extremely optimistic about all 4 of them. Step 1. Talk to her. This was harder than it sounds because a medieval village contained nothing you would recognize as a date venue. What it contained was church. Sunday Mass was the one weekly event where the entire village stood in the same room, and the churchyard afterwards functioned as the social network of the 14th century. News, gossip, business, flirting, all of it happened in the 30 minutes after the priest stopped talking. Gary, however, chooses to open during the sermon, leaning sideways to whisper something charming. The whisper carries. The priest pauses. 2 rows of villagers turn around. Gary spends the rest of Mass studying the floor with tremendous interest. Fortunately, the medieval church also provided a better option. It threw parties. When the parish needed money for a new roof or a new bell, the church wardens brewed an enormous batch of ale, invited everyone, and charged them to drink it. This was called a church ale, and it was exactly what it sounds like. A fundraiser where the fundraising method was a village-wide party with dancing, games, and drinking, all blessed by the parish. Medieval people took their ales seriously in general. Harvest workers could negotiate an allowance of up to a gallon a day as part of their wages, because ale was food, drink, and morale in one bucket. At the church ale, Gary finally gets his moment. He positions himself near Matilda, leans casually against a trestle table, and the trestle table, sensing an opportunity, collapses. Matilda laughs. Crucially, she laughs in the way you laugh with someone, not at them. Gary, lying in a puddle of parish-owned ale, decides this counts as progress. Step 2. The gift. Medieval courtship ran on tokens, ribbons, girdles, purses, gloves, and the absolute classic, a silver penny bent in half. Bending the coin ruined it as money and transformed it into something better, a keepsake, proof that you valued the person more than the penny. It was the medieval version of doing something economically irrational to prove your feelings, a tradition that survives today in the diamond industry. But here is what nobody told Gary. Gifts were evidence. If a courtship went wrong and ended up before a church court, witnesses would be summoned to testify about exactly what was given, when, and with what words. An accepted gift could be presented as proof that a betrothal existed. Court records from this period are full of solemn legal testimony about gloves, kerchiefs, and bent pennies delivered under oath in Latin. Gary hands Matilda the gloves. Matilda accepts them. Her cousin watches the entire exchange from 10 feet away. Gary has just created a witness. Step 3. Say something romantic. This is where the ground under Gary becomes genuinely dangerous, because in medieval England, words could marry you. Church law recognized two kinds of vow. If you said, in the future tense, I will take you as my wife, that was a betrothal, an engagement. But if you said it in the present tense, I take you as my wife, and the other person consented, that was it. You were married. Immediately. No priest required, no church, no witnesses even. In a kitchen, in a garden, under a tree, the sentence alone did the job, and a future tense promise could quietly upgrade itself to a full marriage if the couple afterwards, as the courts delicately phrased it, behaved as married people do. The church hated this. It called these clandestine marriages, punished the couples, and begged everyone to do things properly. But it had backed itself into a corner, because it had also declared consent alone made a marriage, so it had to hold its nose and recognize them as valid. The result was chaos. Church courts spent a remarkable share of their time on lawsuits where one person swore vows had been exchanged and the other swore they absolutely had not, with witnesses recalling exact sentences allegedly spoken years earlier next to an ash tree. Gary, blissfully unaware, has been rehearsing his romantic declaration all week. His draft begins with the words, I take you. He is stopped, one sentence from matrimony, by the village clerk, who overhears him practicing in the lane and explains, slowly, what grammar is about to do to him. Gary revises his speech to the safely vague, I think you are very nice. Matilda seems to agree. They decide, on purpose, with full awareness, to marry. Which brings us to the paperwork. Step 4. Do it properly. First, Gary asks Matilda's father. Legally unnecessary, remember, but socially, skipping it was a good way to start married life with a hostile father-in-law and a village full of opinions. Second, the lord of the manor. Because Matilda's family were customary tenants, her father owed the lord a payment called merche, a fine for the right to marry off his daughter, one of the small indignities of peasant life that survived even after the plague made lords desperate to keep tenants at all. Third, the banns. The priest announced the upcoming marriage in church on 3 consecutive Sundays, and anyone could stand up and object. This was not decoration. The church banned marriage between relatives out to the 4th degree of kinship, and it counted godparents and their families as spiritual kin, which, in a small village where everyone had been baptizing each other's children for generations, made the 3rd Sunday genuinely suspenseful. Gary and Matilda survive all 3, mostly because half of Gary's relatives died of plague, which is the darkest possible reason to have a smooth engagement. Fourth, the calendar. The church prohibited weddings during Advent and Lent, which, together with other restricted days, put a large slice of the year off limits. Gary counts the weeks on his fingers, twice, and books a date in June. The wedding itself happens somewhere that surprises most people. Not inside the church, at the church door. Outside, in public, in front of everyone, because a marriage was a community event, and the community intended to watch. Gary stands at the door in his best tunic, carefully leaning on nothing. He takes Matilda's hand and delivers the vows he has now rehearsed for 3 straight weeks, which turns out to be the one situation in life where over-rehearsing a marriage sentence is a virtue. He does not stumble once. The village is quietly astonished. So is Gary. Then everyone goes inside for Mass, and afterwards, to the important part, the feast, where the ale flows and Gary dances with the enthusiasm of a man who has survived canon law. And here is the quiet truth the court records hide behind all the lawsuits. Most of these marriages, chosen freely by 2 ordinary people in a muddy village, simply held for life. Medieval peasants married for land and labor and security. Yes, but the evidence suggests a remarkable number of them also married for the reason Gary did. She laughed at the trestle table. Gary's troubles, of course, are not confined to 1 century. History is long, and Gary lives in all of it.